and compassion that marked a long record of service. So can I take this opportunity on behalf of the whole House to express our admiration and gratitude to His Majesty the King. Mr. Speaker, before we get into the traditional debate, let me first address the situation in Israel and Gaza. All of us in this House care deeply about the suffering of innocent people and the scenes we have witnessed. And we abhor the way that Hamas use innocent Palestinians as human shields. It is right that the United Kingdom is doubling our aid funding for Palestinian civilians. And we have been consistent throughout in our calls for a humanitarian pause as soon as possible to get aid in and hostages and foreign nationals out. But a unilateral and unconditional ceasefire would simply allow Hamas to entrench its position and continue its attacks against Israel. Only last week, Hamas reiterated its intentions, stating clearly, "We will repeat the October 7th attack time and again until Israel is annihilated." Faced with such a threat, no country could be reasonably expected not to act. Last week, I spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu to reiterate the United Kingdom's backing for Israel's right to defend itself. It is the first duty of any government. I also stressed the need to allow more aid into Gaza, to take all possible measures to minimize civilian casualties, and to avoid inflaming tensions in the West Bank, where settler violence must stop. I can update the House that now well over 100 British nationals have been able to leave Gaza, thanks to our diplomatic efforts to reopen the Rafah crossing. And the Development Minister will make a full statement to the House tomorrow. But let me also reiterate this. We will not stand for the hatred and anti-Semitism we have seen on our streets. It sickens me to think that British Jews are looking over their shoulder in this country. That children are going to school covering up their school badges for fear of attack. This government will do whatever it takes to keep the Jewish community safe. Just as we will do whatever it takes to keep every community safe. And we will fight hatred and extremism in all its forms and wherever it is found, today, tomorrow, and always. We are the world's most successful, multi-ethnic, multi-faith democracy, and we will protect our democracy from all threats to it. Mr. Speaker, this King's Speech is about what this government is about, taking long-term decisions to build a brighter future for our country. It builds on foundations that were far stronger than they were just a year ago. Inflation falling and on track to be halved. An economy now growing faster than France and Germany. National debt on track to fall. More support for the NHS this winter, and we are stopping the boats with crossings this year down by over a fifth, as we ensure that it is this government and not criminal gangs who decides to come to our country. Now that we strengthen the foundations, this King's Speech turns to the future, taking long-term decisions with a single objective: to change our country for the better. Change in our economy, with new legislation to improve our energy security. Join a huge trade pact with the fastest growing region in the world and prepare to seize the opportunities of a new technological age. Change in our society, with new protections for leaseholders and renters, a bill to safeguard the future of football clubs and fans, and the historic legislation that will finally create the first smoke-free generation. And change to keep our nation secure and our communities safe, with tougher sentences for criminals, more powers for the police and security services, and tough new action to clamp down on antisocial behaviour. What will all this mean for the British people, Mr. Speaker? More jobs, more investment, and higher growth. More police on the streets with stronger powers to keep us safe. Places people are proud to call home. A country strong at home, confident abroad, and with a better future ahead for all our people. That is the change that this King's Speech and this government will deliver. Mr. Speaker, His Majesty's gracious speech was brilliantly proposed, by my right honourable friend, the member for Scarborough and Whitby. Now, I will always be grateful to him, because when I was first selected as the Conservative candidate for Richmond, my right honourable friend took a call from a prominent farmer in my local community who had expressed some consternation about the revelation that I didn't eat beef. Quick as a flash, my right honourable friend replied, "Don't worry, he's the perfect candidate. There'll be more for me and thee." And as a proud Yorkshireman, my right honourable friend has a reputation for being very careful with money. Just the other day, he went shopping for a new pair of shoes. When the shop assistant tried to throw away the old pair, he said, "Hang on a second, I want to keep those laces. There's still life in them yet." And I've often regarded myself as a trainee Yorkshireman, and it turned out with him I was also a trainee fiscal Conservative. And that's why I asked my right honourable friend to apply his same zeal for savings to efficiencies that we could make across Whitehall. He came back with a great list. Yorkshire tea bags are perfectly fine for another 3 or 4 goes. The DEFRA thermostat was set far too high at 17 degrees. And 7 bins are simply far too many. My right honourable friend is probably the only member of this House who is the proud owner of his own graveyard. Apparently, he even does some of the digging himself. And no wonder he's such a staunch supporter of the government's plan to protect renters, because he fully supports the right of his tenants to be left undisturbed over the very long term. Now, in his maiden speech, my right honourable friend proudly boasted that Whitby and his constituency was voted #1 weekend holiday destination by the readers of Saga magazine. Well, I am delighted as my honourable friend retires and lifts his gaze from his own copy of Saga that he already finds himself in the home of blue skies, blue waters and blue rinses. Whitby is, as he reminded us, where Dracula made landfall. That shadowy, pale, haunting figure, age beyond his years. And that's what 2 decades in this House can do for you, Mr. Speaker. But as a government whip, a minister in 4 departments and a dedicated constituency MP, my right honourable friend has had an extraordinary career. Among his many achievements, I would particularly highlight his introduction of the first ever roadside drug tests. Before that, we had no way of clamping down on dangerous drug driving. This was a landmark policy that has saved untold numbers of lives. It is a legacy he should be proud of, and a reminder of the good that politics can do. My right honourable friend is a great parliamentarian. I'm proud to call him a friend. His speech was in the finest traditions of this House, and his wit, integrity and sound good sense will be much missed on all sides. Now, Mr. Speaker, continuing the North Yorkshire theme, the gracious speech was brilliantly seconded by someone also born and bred in God's own county, who is today the honourable member for Stroud. And I'm sure the whole House will join me in paying tribute to our fantastic NHS and sending our very best wishes to her daughter Tilly. Now, some may think of my honourable friend as a shy, retiring and studious type. After all, as she said today, she often prefers to be in the library. But we are discovering another side to my honourable friend. We've now heard about her time in the naughty corner. We've heard about the Spice Girl platforms. And I can also today reveal that back in the 1990s, she won the prestigious, fiercely contested crown of Yorkshire Rock and Roll Dancing Queen. And in a rich and varied career, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend was also a highly regarded yoga teacher. So when she read in the Times that the Shadow Cabinet were being encouraged to take up yoga in the office, she was waiting for the phone call. But it turns out that no Conservative, not even one as supremely talented as my honourable friend, can teach the party opposite anything when it comes to constantly changing from one contorted position to another. My honourable friend also mentioned today taking advice and inspiration from a certain parliamentary sketch writer. Well, if she's hoping that one day he might make her the target of his acerbic wit, well, Mr. Speaker, I would just say, be careful what you wish for. I have been called many things in my time, but I'm not sure I will ever forget being branded the titch in vacuum-packed underpants. But on a serious note, my honourable friend has already made a huge impact on her short time in this place. Nowhere more than in her fantastic campaign to improve childcare provision. Inspiring my honourable friend, the Chancellor, to announce 30 hours of free childcare a week for under fours in England in the March budget. This is a landmark policy that will make an enormous difference to millions of families up and down the country, and my honourable friend should be incredibly proud of her part in making that happen. She overcame great odds to reach her place today. Growing up on free school meals, she left home as a teenager and worked her way up as a family lawyer without attending university, before becoming the first female MP of Stroud in 2019. Sometimes people ask me what being a Conservative is all about. I can think of no greater example than that, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend is a remarkable person, a dedicated MP, someone with a huge future ahead, and her speech was in the finest traditions of this House. Now, Mr. Speaker, let me also thank the Leader of the Opposition for his contribution to this debate, and indeed his first U-turn of it. As a former Republican, he used to think this country shouldn't even have a King's Speech. But at least that is one U-turn the whole country will welcome. Now, the right honourable gentleman is prone to changing his position, but in fairness, his speech did strike a few consistent notes. Higher inflation, more strikes, more immigration, and higher borrowing. The party opposite's plan to unnecessarily borrow £28 billion more every year and give in to inflation-busting pay demands from their union paymasters is dangerous, inflationary, and the British people would pay the price in higher interest rates and higher taxes. Now, in truth, Mr. Speaker, Labour will borrow anything, people's money, people's ideas, and it now turns out that his copy-and-paste Chancellor is very happy to borrow other people's work too. But she's not the only member opposite to get unstuck by a book. Earlier this year, the Leader of the Opposition had to abandon writing his own book, Return the Deposit. It was supposed to be his vision for Britain. But his publishers discovered what the British people already know: he simply doesn't have one. While he stands for the same old ideas, we are focused on the long-term decisions that will provide a better and brighter future for everyone. And that's what this King's Speech will deliver, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that change starts with changing our economy. We've already delivered the largest fall in inflation since the 1980s, a faster recovery from the pandemic than Germany, France and Japan, and tens of billions of pounds of new investment from around the world. We believe the role of government is to create the conditions for the private sector to thrive. That's where new growth and new jobs come from. That's why we've given business a £27 billion tax cut on investment, launched 12 free ports around the UK to create jobs and investment, and introduced legislation in this King's Speech so that we can confirm our membership of the CPTPP, a huge trading pact with the fastest growing region in the world. Now, of course, I hear from the party opposite that it make no difference. We can only do that because of our new freedoms outside of the European Union. Freedoms that the Leader of the Opposition wants to abandon and instead lock the United Kingdom into a new European deal that would tie us into EU rules and regulations that we'd have no say over and open our borders to 100,000 additional EU migrants every single year. Now, as well as failing to secure our borders, the opposition would also fail to secure our energy supplies. Now, we know that economic growth requires energy security. We've already invested record amounts in renewables like offshore wind. We back Sizewell C, the first new nuclear in decades. And the King's Speech introduces new legislation for North Sea oil and gas, supporting hundreds of thousands of British jobs. And compare and contrast with the opposition's energy policy.
people have the right to intervene. No, if the Prime Minister wishes to give way, that's up to the Prime Minister. If he wishes not to, that's also fine.
Will the Prime Minister allow?
Prime Minister.
Compare and contrast.
The Prime Minister's not giving way. Prime Minister.
Compare and contrast with the opposition's energy policy. There's one word for it: naive. Not my word, Mr. Speaker, but that of their own union paymasters. I'll happily give way to the honourable gentleman.
I'm very grateful to the Prime Minister, bearing in mind that a very significant proportion of people who sleep rough are army veterans and people who've had acquired brain injuries. Does the Prime Minister agree with the Home Secretary when she says that homelessness, sleeping rough, is a lifestyle choice? And if he doesn't, will he sack her?
Mr. Speaker, I don't draw the link from that to energy security, but what I can tell him is that thanks to the efforts of the member for Plymouth Vorview, veterans' homelessness is at record low levels in this country. And in fact, rough sleeping overall is down by around a third since the peak, Mr. Speaker, thanks to the actions of this government, and in particular, the landmark Homelessness Reduction Act passed by this government, which has helped relieve or prevent over 640,000 people's homelessness, Mr. Speaker. But returning to energy security, the party opposite want to ban all new oil and gas licences, risking us becoming even more dependent on Putin's Russia for our crucial supplies of energy. But what's even more absurd about their policy, Mr. Speaker, is this. The honourable gentleman isn't against oil and gas, all oil and gas. He's just against British oil and gas. And yes, Mr. Speaker, unlike the opposition, who want to pursue net zero with an ideological zeal, going even faster and further no matter what the cost or the disruption, we on this side of the House are cutting the cost of net zero for working people, saving British families £5, £10, £15,000, and that's a choice, Mr. Speaker. I'll happily give way to Honourable.
I'm grateful to him for giving way, and I want to ask him when he's going to start being straight with the British public, because, he pretends that new oil and gas licences will somehow guarantee our energy security when he knows that oil and gas is sold on international markets to the highest bidder. He pretends it's going to get people's bills down, yet his own Secretary of State for Energy has said that it will not get people's bills down. So when is he going to stop governing by gimmick? And when is he going to start actually rolling out the home insulation programme that will get people's bills down?
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Lady talked about being straight. It's this party and me that was straight with the British people about the costs of getting to net zero, something that her and the party opposite would do well to follow. And because we've been honest and transparent and we have cut those costs, we will save British families £5, £10 or £15,000.
Prime Minister, just a second. He gave way to you. At least give the courtesy of hearing the answer. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, and that's the simple choice. A government on the side of hard-working people, or an opposition and the Honourable Lady on the side of the eco-zealots, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, if we want to truly change our country, we need a stronger society. And that's why this King's Speech introduces a landmark bill to create the first smoke-free generation. It will prevent deaths, improve people's lives, and free the NHS to support others. It is the most significant public health intervention by any government for generations. Historic change from a historic King's Speech. But that's not all we're doing for the NHS, Mr. Speaker. The government has invested record sums, created 50 million more primary care appointments, brought more beds, more ambulances, and through the NHS's first ever long-term workforce plan, we will recruit more doctors, nurses and dentists than ever before. That's what the NHS needs, not the damaging strike action that Labour refuses to condemn, even though it is adding tens of thousands of people to waiting lists every single day. The party opposite also opposed our plans to provide a minimum safety level during the strikes. Now, does the party opposite and the honourable member opposite think that vulnerable patients don't deserve life-serving health care, or are they just too weak to stand up to the unions? Either way, the conclusion is clear. you simply can't trust Labour with the NHS, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, let me turn to the most important part of a stronger society, education. Of all that we've achieved since 2010, this is what I am most proud of. Under the party opposite, only 2/3 of schools were rated good or outstanding. Now it is around 90%. They took us down the international league tables. We are now soaring up them. They devalued apprenticeships. We're investing in them. They backed rip-off degrees, and we are ending them. And we're introducing the new Advanced British Standard, so that everyone will study maths and English to 18, learn a broader range of subjects with more hours in the classroom, and finally, break down the barriers between academic and technical education. More teachers, higher standards, and more apprenticeships. On this side of the House, a stronger society is an opportunity society, and this Conservative government is delivering. But we can only build that stronger society with stronger communities. And that's what this King's Speech does. We're reforming the housing market to empower leaseholders, to give renters more security, establishing a new independent football regulator to give fans a greater voice in their clubs, and delivering our promise to level up with record investment in local areas. We're building 1 million more homes, all while protecting the Green Belt, unlike the Charter for Sprawl that we see from the party opposite. And, Mr. Speaker, that brings me to transport. Every single penny that would have been spent on HS2, a repeatedly delayed, expensive project that failed to meet people's real needs, is now being invested in the North, in the Midlands, and right across the country. £36 billion of investment in projects that people really need and actually want. Network North is, without question, the most ambitious scheme for northern transport any government has developed ever. Yet first, the Leader of the Opposition was against it. Then he was for it. Now he's not really sure. But one thing is for sure, you simply can't trust a word he says. Now, Mr. Speaker, none of those important changes will mean anything if people don't feel safe in their communities. And the facts are clear. It is this government that is on the side of law and order. This King's Speech introduces legislation to better support victims, as well as new measures to combat the scourge of antisocial behaviour, all building on a proud record of tackling crime. 20,000 more police officers on the streets, more police on the streets than ever before. And we've heard a lot about 13 years. Well, since 2010, crime halved. Violent crime halved. Burglary also halved. And antisocial behaviour down by 70%. Tougher sentences for rapists and sex offenders, something that the party opposite voted against, Mr. Speaker. And for the worst offenders, life finally means life. All while the Leader of the Opposition and the front bench campaigned to stop the deportation of dangerous foreign criminals. Now, Mr. Speaker, we're just days away from Remembrance Sunday, so let me close by paying tribute to our armed forces. At this moment, over 7,000 servicemen and women are deployed overseas, from the frozen wastes of the high north to the streets of Kosovo. They are the best of us. We owe to all our veterans a lifelong debt of gratitude. Now, I'm proud of our work led in Cabinet by my right honourable friend, the member for Plymouth Moorview, to make this the best country in the world to be a veteran. And that's what you get with this government. We're on the side of Britain's armed forces. We're investing record amounts in defence. We're an unwavering ally to the Ukrainian people, and we're proud to be one of the largest contributors to NATO. But in contrast, Mr. Speaker, what do you get with the party opposite? They tried to install... They never like being reminded about it, but they tried to install, as Prime Minister, a man who wanted to abolish the armed forces, withdraw from NATO, and back the UK's enemies over its allies. Labour can't be trusted with our nation's security, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, this King's Speech builds on the strong foundation of economy well on its way to recovery. It rejects big government and instead backs people and businesses to thrive. It strengthens society with historic measures to support the nation's health and education. It secures our streets and borders with tougher sentences for criminals and powers for police. And above all, this King's Speech delivers change. Change in our economy, change in our society, change in our communities. It takes long-term decisions for a brighter future, and I commend it to this House.
Stephen Flynn, the leader of the SNP.
Here, here.